Hello and welcome everybody to your Pluto in Aquarius horoscopes, as well as just general conversation around this huge shift from outer planet Pluto. And whenever we get an outer planet changing signs, it's a big deal because the outer planets create the biggest changes in our lives, the biggest lasting changes in our lives. So Pluto, far out in the depths of the sky, we can't see it from a telescope. It's declassified as a planet. It's, what is it, an asteroid, something like that. Anyway, I feel like none of that, other than the fact that it's really far out and really far away, has much significance on how it's going to have a psychological, spiritual, emotional, tangible impact on our lives, which is really the greatest use of astrology, in my opinion, is being able to translate what's going on in the sky into our own lived experiences, which show up in ways of tangible material things, emotional experiences we're feeling on the inside, mental experiences we're feeling in our mind and our thoughts and our communications, and experiences of our own energy levels and passions. And we think about all the elements, you know, earth, I was to say wind, earth, air, fire and water. What do these things represent? Well, fire is kind of action, water is emotions, air is thoughts, and earth is material resources. And so Pluto has been in earthy Capricorn for the last 16, 17 years, give or take a few retrogrades. And Capricorn is this cardinal earth sign, which initiates things to do with, that's what cardinal means, initiation, bringing in a new season, bringing in change. Experiences around Capricorn themes. So we marry up the planet with the zodiac sign. And Capricorn, Capricorn, I've got a fish on my mind today. I'll tell you about that in a minute. It's very connected to my own Pluto story. Capricorn is very connected to kind of hierarchy, structures, government, these kind of institutions which we've surrounded ourselves with for many years, like beyond the 16 years that we've been experiencing Pluto in Capricorn, where we feel like we are told what to do from an external resource, very connected to patriarchy because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, which is typically this kind of father, masculine type energy. And it's very connected to tradition, kind of classical approaches, and whatever those things may mean for you. Will be quite different, I should imagine, to how you thought about those things 16 years ago to where we find ourselves now on the precipice of this brand new life experience of Plutonian themes. And so what does Pluto mean? Well, Pluto is power. First and foremost, it's power, it's riches. They're some of the kind of juicier keywords we use here. It's a kind of inner wisdom. It's very intelligent on a kind of like a powerful intelligence. I always think about this in terms of an emotional powerful intelligence. However, that intelligence has been coming through whilst it's in the sign of Capricorn. Emotional intelligence would be much more this idea of Pluto in a water sign like Scorpio, where in modern astrology it's typically thought to kind of rule Scorpio, but in Hellenistic ancient astrology, the kind of astrology that I practice much more these days, Mars is the ruler of Scorpio. But I definitely find when I marry up the two practices, because I'm very much, I would say I'm 75% ancient astrology, 25% modern astrology, modern psychological. I think there's no denying that Pluto and Scorpio are kind of intrinsically linked. And therefore, that kind of brings in this kind of emotional power, emotional wisdom, the ability to potentially control situations through emotional experiences. And so we've also got the idea, coming back to the idea of Pluto and the keywords, we've got depths, we've got shame, we've got fear, we've got shadow, we've got regeneration, and we've got rising up again. And so I really like to kind of try and focus on the more positives, but I am not denying that Pluto doesn't always feel positive. In fact, a lot of the time it feels really challenging, and it really feels like it's taking us into those depths, those places of fear and shame. And that's why it's kind of difficult to look at sometimes. And I just kind of want to provide some horoscopes, because I feel like Pluto is something that we don't really talk about. I mean, astrologers talk about Pluto. A lot of astrologers will be talking about Pluto this week because of this big sign change, which will be affecting the next 20 years when it moves into Aquarius tonight. And yes, it's very powerful. And a lot of astrologers will be talking about this idea of it kind of taking us on this deep journey. And like I say, I want to focus on some of the kind of more positive expressions of Pluto. However, there's no denying that when Pluto first changes sign, and therefore in whole sign houses, so in your birth chart, when you've got your birth chart chopped into kind of those 12 segments that make up a birth chart, though each segment is a whole sign house. So you've got the zodiac signs on the outer wheel and the house numbers on the inner wheel. So each house number marries up with a zodiac sign. And if I've lost you, like, stay with me. I promise that's probably as technical as I'm going to get. But just so that you can marry up your house number with your zodiac sign. And so tonight, around about 8:30 Greenwich Mean Time, because I'm in the UK, so I use that time zone, but adjust for where you are on the planet and your time zone. Pluto will move into Aquarius, and therefore it's going to move out of Capricorn, which will govern one house in your birth chart, and into Aquarius, the house next to it in your birth chart, and activate a whole new myriad of life area, basically. So say you've had Pluto in your 4th house for the last 16 years, and that's been governing the kind of home you live in, your ancestors, your relationship with your parents, grandparents, roots, ancestral kind of lineage, and finding your tribe. Then when it moves into Aquarius, into your 5th house, then this will be much more connected to your experience of children, creativity, how you experience fun in your life, how you create romance in your life, these kinds of things. So there's this key change depending on which house it's going to be moving from and into, which I find very exciting. So yes, let's just talk quickly. So Pluto will be moving into Aquarius for the next 20 years. It's going to be here until 2044, when it will move into the sign of Pisces, and therefore it will have a different ruling planet. And so a little bit about the ruling planet part of this story is that Pluto has, this is getting a bit technical again, isn't it? I promise I'm going to get to horoscopes soon. And I'll put timestamps in so that you can jump to yours as well. But Pluto's been in the sign of Capricorn for the last 16, 17 years, and Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And then Pluto will move into Aquarius for the next 20 years, and Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. But the difference being that Capricorn is a feminine earth cardinal sign. So feminine being much more kind of instinctual in nature, earth being tangible, material. And what was the last thing that I said? Cardinal being that initiating energy. And then Aquarius is masculine, air, fixed. Masculine, air, fixed. So much more kind of, masculine zodiac signs are much more kind of like out there and kind of on display and connected to the ego. And air is very much thoughts and ideas and kind of creation of ideas. And then fixed is kind of like being very steady in your thoughts, being very kind of like fixed in your thoughts. Yeah, and so that's where we get this kind of energy shift. And so again, for everybody in their birth charts, like Pluto is always transiting. So transiting just means like moving around your birth chart, moving around in the sky right now and kind of having an impact on your own birth chart. It's always transiting through one of the houses in your birth chart. It's always taking all of those things we talked about: power, regeneration, depth, sphere, shadow, all of that kind of stuff. It's always doing that work somewhere. And then once it connects to personal planets, maybe like your sun or your moon or your Mercury, for example, that's when we start to really feel it as a personal part of our story, as opposed to something that we're kind of witnessing in the world, but perhaps on a more kind of quiet inner level. And yeah, so if you've got any planets or angles being ascendant, descendant, MC, IC, then in the sign of Capricorn, then you'll be pleased to hear that Pluto's moving off of those and away from all of those Capricorn planets in your birth chart or angles potentially, and into the sign of Aquarius. So if you have any planets or angles in the sign of Aquarius, then this next 20-year chapter will be kind of a bigger part of your life. And as Pluto will start at 0000. Let me just show you the chart quickly. Let me present my screen. Here we go. So let me find it. Sorry, I'm sending you down a mirrored tunnel here. Okay. So this is the chart of 19th of November, 2024 at 20:29. So 29 minutes past 8 tonight. I put it on London time. And here is the Pluto glyph in the sign of Capricorn in the 6th house in this chart. This chart would be a Leo rising, for example. And Pluto's at 29 degrees and 59 minutes. So the degrees are always on the kind of outside of the wheel, and the minutes are on the inside of the wheel. So 29:59. So if anybody's got any planets or points at 29:59 Capricorn, I would love to hear from you and hear how you're experiencing this, because it feels powerful. Let me know in the comments. Contact me on Instagram at Freya Astrology. I would just love to hear your story. I'm astrology mad. I love to hear your stories. And then if we just literally jump 1 minute ahead at 8:30 tonight, how neat and tidy for these two Saturn ruled signs to do it at exactly 8:30. You can see that over here. To change signs, Pluto will be at 0000 of Aquarius, and in this chart it would be in the 7th house. And that is just all I wanted to share in terms of charts, because I feel like sometimes it gets a bit confusing otherwise. Right, it's getting warm in here. I put the heating on and now I'm feeling quite hot. And it's the excitement of doing a video. So we are going to crack into it. And I was going to try and be clever and do this in a different order, but actually now that I'm recording, it gets quite complicated to do that. So I'm just going to start with Aries, and I apologize for not being clever and starting with Capricorn, which is really what I wanted to do, because I just wanted to say Capricorn risings, woohoo, that this is no longer in your first house. You've been on a deeply personal journey, probably the most personal out of all of the zodiac signs, and you can feel that release of tension and pressure and shadow work in your own personal experience, in your own body, in how you are presented to the world, in how other people view you. And, you know, just, it's a very personal one for Capricorn. And so it's moving into your 2nd house, which is completely different. So Aries rising, and I always think, gosh, I should note down this time of when I'm saying this, because I will never be able to timestamp. But yes, Aries rising, Pluto in Capricorn has been in your 10th house of career, success and visibility for the last 16 years. Now it's moving to your 11th house of friends, groups, community. And this feels like you've been on a long journey of deeply renovating kind of the things that you're recognized for in the world, perhaps going through power struggles with bosses at work, perhaps deciding to be self-employed over the last 16 years because you've realized that actually having power kind of imposed upon you from an authority figure, whatever that may look like to you now, possibly quite different to how authority figures looked to you 16 years ago when Pluto first moved into Capricorn, may have sort of taken you on this deep transformation of your sense of self. You know, this is an angular house to your rising sign as well. So that's a powerful aspect in astrology when you get angular angular transits, especially Pluto, because it moves so slowly. So it's doing this deep renovation of kind of who you are in the world and what you're recognized for and your successes in this life. And you're moving into the 11th house. So now the deep renovation work really focuses in on how you show up in groups, where you find yourself in terms of friends and community and the sorts of people that you like to spend time with. And perhaps your groups are very connected to becoming, as this transit ingresses tonight, with Pluto into Aquarius for the next 20 years, perhaps the types of groups that you're getting involved in are much more connected to the deeper side of life, the kind of shadow sides of life. Perhaps you're joining like a death circle, like a composting circle, a circle where you are honoring the kind of the darker parts of life that sometimes we find it difficult to look at as a society. But actually, the idea of Pluto moving into Aquarius, perhaps as a society, Aquarius is very connected to society and humanity. Perhaps we will all, as a collective, be becoming far more interested in this idea of like, you know, what is a life? How is it sacred? How is it precious, and what is that kind of fine line between really feeling like a powerful expression of living and a powerful expression of dying, and kind of honoring these processes. And it feels like Aries risings, you could be a big part of that narrative in the bigger collective, but also for you personally, you may find that you are doing a lot of kind of shadow work, but in a group environment. Perhaps you don't feel like you want to be on your own in this. And Aries rising, that's quite an independent sign. Aries, it's very much the first sign of the zodiac, that kind of like, yep, I'm here, it's all about me. And actually sharing something in a group environment could be really healing for you at this time. And I would pay attention to the friendships that are beginning but also ending over the next 20 years, because they will have a deep impact on your own experience of power and rising up from the ashes like the phoenix. How many times have I used that? I always use that. I love that though. It's such a great expression for Scorpio and Pluto, actually. Okay, I'm going to tick these off as I go. So Taurus. If you're a Taurus rising, we are moving from Pluto in Capricorn in your 9th house of faith, a higher understanding of the world, long distance travel, foreign cultures, teaching, and astrology also lives here for Taurus risings. And perhaps you've been going through a deep journey around you know, perhaps you've been interested in like the power structures that that exist within religions, for example, within spiritual communities, and perhaps your own understanding of spirituality has been deeply impacted by the things that you've kind of learned about over the last 16 years. Perhaps you've really found a strong sense of meaning within a certain practice. Doesn't need to be spiritual, but, you know, perhaps anything kind of Capricorn, earthy, perhaps you've realized that actually walking in nature is part of your spirituality, and you need to do that on a daily basis or a very regular basis to really feel like you are honoring this kind of life, this precious life that you have been given. And you're starting to reap the gifts of that now, because that's the thing at the end of a Pluto transit. We start to really see the riches, although they can come along if they're impacting, you know, specific degreed angles or natal planets. Once Pluto moves away from those degrees and it's already made that conjunction where the kind of deepest transformation can occur, you can like really feel the gifts at that point as well, as Pluto moves away and kind of gets off your back. And it's moving into your 10th house of career, how you're recognized in the world. And it's really going through this idea of, you know, solidly finding, because Aquarius is this fixed sign, solidly finding your place in the world in terms of work. Perhaps you're introduced to a powerful person, like a boss, for example, or like a bank manager that helps kind of change your life by giving you a chance with a mortgage deal, for example, like that. Just somebody kind of powerful, that has an impact on your kind of appearance of success. And when you've got Aquarius at the top of your birth chart, as Taurus risings do have, your idea of success is likely, you know, connected to the thinking mind and your intellect, your creator mind as well. When we think about Aquarius, it's very much the creator, the kind of the amazing inventors of this world. You're kind of going to find that, yes, you're recognized for that, you're always kind of recognized for that, but now there's a checking in with like, is that still what I want to be recognized for, or is there something else? Is there some very kind of solid, like perhaps there's some study that's going to be taking place. Aquarius is quite intellectual. Perhaps there's some personal research going on around, you know, what is it that I want to do in my life? You know, perhaps there's some humanitarian work coming your way that very much connects to the kind of the fears and the shadows that exist within our society. And, you know, Aquarius is brilliant at kind of standing up for the underdog and really kind of fighting for the kind of fairness and what's right in this world, despite the kind of the depths that Pluto can take all humans to at various points in their lives. Yeah, and Taurus risings, you could really find yourselves becoming kind of strong advocates for Plutonian themes, you know, and perhaps we think about that idea of working with the darkness, working with the shadow, perhaps working in like, you know, really in some realm that is connected to kind of death and honoring the processes of life and death and their kind of fragility side by side. And perhaps that becomes more of the thing that kind of brings you notoriety and also potentially financial gain as well, because the 10th house is one of those work houses. So that is Taurus. Gemini risings. You have had Pluto and Capricorn in your 8th house. I'm jumping ahead. In your 8th house of other people's resources, debts, loans, inheritances, but also the deeper, more, I mean, a very Pluto house, the 8th house. Lots of themes connect between the 8th house and Pluto. And thinking about a lot of unspoken stuff, perhaps a bit of a healing journey has been going on over the last 16, 17 years with Pluto and Capricorn, especially if you've got personal planets in the sign of Capricorn. And now you're moving into, sorry, I keep looking away because I'm looking at my notes and I'm trying to like look at the screen at the same time, but it's a bit tricky. Bear with me, please. Yes, and it's going to be moving into your 9th house of higher learning, faith, spiritual seeking, and like astrology. Sorry, not Aquarius, astrology. The 9th house, teaching, higher education institutions, perhaps. You're going on a deep journey of kind of self-discovery around what it is that you really believe. Perhaps you've gotten through so much of your life already where you feel like you kind of don't really have necessarily a belief system, or perhaps it's not a kind of focus in your life. And as Pluto moves into Aquarius, you realize, actually, I do have a very kind of fixed, mentally fixed idea about what my beliefs are. And now I'm finding that perhaps there are people I'm connecting with, perhaps abroad as well. Perhaps you're connecting online. You know, Aquarius is very technological, so connecting online makes a lot of sense for Aquarius. Perhaps you're connecting to people online who have similar views, similar beliefs, and you are really kind of moving into this 20-year realm of you know, finding a kind of regular practice that supports who you are as a human in this world and kind of gives you that sense of meaning and purpose. If you're an astrologer, this could be a huge time in terms of like study for definite, and for, you know, really finding your teacher. I mean, it just, even if you're not an astrologer, like this is a strong time for Gemini risings to be finding teachers, finding those kind of people that just kind of show up in our lives that kind of deeply change the way that we think about the world. Perhaps there is, you know, when you go, perhaps if you go abroad, we think about the ninth house as being long distance travel sometimes. If you go abroad, perhaps you really find yourself, you know, I'm imagining that, who is it, that one that looks into the water? I'm imagining that painting by Klimt, actually. I'm not thinking about, is it Narcissus that looks into the water? And then that's not right, is it? Anyway, I always get my mythology wrong. But the idea being that, you know, maybe you're in Greece and you don't live in Greece, you live in the UK, you go to Greece and you're staring into like that crystal clear water, but suddenly you see yourself reflected back at yourself. And there's some realizations that go through, like, you know, is this, you know, where do I find my power? Do I see it in myself? Or is my power external? Does my power come from a teacher? Does my power come from traveling the world and interacting with other cultures? Am I finding that I'm now imagining there's that film, oh my gosh, what's it called? Like Gold Rush or something, with Kate Hudson and Matthew McConaughey. God, it's a good laugh. And they are like these like deep sea treasure hunters or something, and I have to find the name of that film. They find a treasure chest and they it basically like squirts up from underneath the sea, and all of the gold comes out and there's gems and everything. And like Matthew McConaughey's character before this is like a complete bum, he's got no money, and Kate Hudson's just like, no, like it's never going to work, this relationship, blah blah blah. And then they like find this treasure and these riches together, and it's the story that goes on with that. I have to find the name of that film. It's a good one. Yeah, and so lots of riches coming to you from either abroad or teachers, or perhaps you're embarking on a kind of deep learning journey. Maybe you're beginning working on like a degree, for example, and you're connecting with higher education institutions. Okay. Cancer risings, this one has been in your 7th house for the last 16 years of marriage, one-to-one partnerships, therapy work, kind of finding those close people that we can really kind of rely on in this lifetime, who can help show us by reflecting back. The 7th house has this very kind of projector quality. So those people in the 7th house really reflect back to us what it is that we're actually experiencing, and help us kind of learn through that experience. So really finding kind of who we can trust. Pluto is very connected to this idea of like trust and power, and you know, like I trust you, you trust me, but it's taken a long time to get there. Like when you've got Pluto in the 7th house, perhaps it takes a long time to kind of build a sense of trust in those relationships, also like romantic relationships, long-term relationships as well. There's been a real journey going on there. And now it's moving into your 8th house of other people's resources, shared resources, very much resources with the partner. Perhaps you're opening like a joint bank account together, perhaps you're taking out a mortgage together, and also like a lot of renovation to do with like what are your beliefs around death and dying, and life and death side by side, and that kind of story. And when I said earlier that I'm going to tell you about the fish, or that I was thinking about fish symbolism, so this is me. I'm Cancer rising, okay, and it's been in my 7th house, and now it's moving into my 8th house tonight. And sometimes when you get, well, often you when you get Pluto changing houses, you would get a bit of a crisis point, as a kind of welcome party, to say it gently, into Pluto in a new sign. And we got this fish tank recently, and we got some new fish, and then introduced a couple more like last week. Anyway, one of the new ones is like slowly dying, or he's very, very ill. And it is amazing how sad I feel about it. It takes me right back to, you know, various pets dying in my lifetime, and kind of the emotions that it took me to, my fear of death, and all of these things. And I've been really emotional about it. But I know that as Pluto moves into Aquarius, that's probably going to be when he finally passes, because he is hanging on at the moment for dear life, bless him. I'm sending him so much healing and love kind of through the fish tank. but I know that he is not at all well. And it's like, actually, it's just really important to be with him. And I think, you know, I think back over the last kind of 16 years and building up these strong relationships with other people. So this is relevant for all Cancer risings. Who can we trust? Who can't we trust? You know, power within relationships as well. You know, who holds the power? And perhaps you've got a close friendship and sometimes it feels like the power is too much with the other person. And perhaps you've been really learning about how to kind of assert yourself in relationship, and your ability to kind of say no, like, no, I can't meet today, but I can meet at this point. And understanding, you know, that we all have our own power and how we can assert or, you know, hold back from that. And I think about the idea of, you know, my fear of death from childhood. I think a lot of us, you know, go through this experience. And my 6-year-old at the moment keeps saying to me, Mummy, I don't want you to die. And, you know, one of my family dogs is kind of not doing so well at the moment. And he's worried about him and, you know, him passing on. And I find myself just coming out with this, I just feel like really disappointing answers. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere soon. And you don't need to worry about that. It's a long time away. And I just think, like, I don't know that that's helpful. And I want to know more about how can I be helpful when we're faced with, you know, probably one of the most extreme parts of life being death. And I want to know how to re-empower myself so that I'm not scared of this very, very natural decaying process of life gradually changing. You know, you kind of sometimes you feel like you're on the upwards trajectory, sometimes you feel like you're on the downwards. And I think we see this as women as well when we kind of reach the age. I was listening to a podcast yesterday and they were talking about I can't even think of the word. Okay, we were thinking about the maturity of eggs inside our ovaries, and that they're considered geriatric at 35 years old. And they start to degenerate very quickly after 35 years old, which is why fertility is kind of greatly impacted from 35 kind of onwards. And they were even going to they're putting studies into, I think it was on Women's Hour on like Radio 4, they're putting studies into, they're going to study the journey of aging, because actually studying the ovaries from age 35 onwards in women is one of the quickest ways to learn about aging, because it's one of the quickest natural processes within a body, within a female body, is the decrease in kind of egg, it's not consumption, is it, egg release, egg quality, and that kind of thing. Menopause was the word that I was thinking of. And then menopause moves in, you know, into our lives in midlife, and typically, and that's a whole journey of you know, very much feeling like going from being fertile to being no longer fertile. And there's a lot connected to that story and death itself. And I'm definitely finding that as a kind of like, I'm very, very like noticing just the smallest changes now that I'm aged 40 and I'm a premenopausal person. I wouldn't say that I'm perimenopausal yet, but I feel like I'm definitely noticing changes. And if my eggs were getting geriatric at 35, and I did go on to have a child like beyond 35. I think I had my second child when I was 38, and he's fine. And there was, you know, it was a great egg and brilliant, you know, brilliant results. So it's not all doom and gloom, but just that there is this kind of deep inner journey going on with the idea of death and rebirth, shared resources, and the idea of relying on the resources that are around us, perhaps accepting some of the financial help that is around us, the material help that is around us, and welcoming in some of that kind of, because it's Aquarius being an air sign, some of that intellectual wisdom, taking that on as an inheritance. So really appreciating the intellectual wisdom of other people in our lives, and you know, learning about the darker themes of life, you know, through these very close relationships in the 8th house. There's also this connection to kind of sex as well with Pluto and the 8th house. So there might be a kind of deep story going on here about like facing your relationship with sex, which could look quite different now to what it might look like in 20 years time. And that could really be going through a bit of a kind of inner dive and then resurgence story. Sorry, I knew I would talk a lot about that one because because that's my one. I try not to be biased. Yes, but I had to tell you the fish story. So, and I'll keep you updated. I think, yeah, I've come home today and he's on his side and his fin, he's all curled up, but his gills are still going, bless him. Right. Leo risings. Capricorn has been in your 6th house. Pluto and Capricorn has been in your 6th house of daily routines and health. So really, you may have found that you've had to be checking in a lot over the last 16, 17 years. Perhaps you've been really getting to grips with food allergies, for example, or just kind of daily routines that don't necessarily serve you. You know, for example, perhaps you've been taking to excess the idea of drinking, or the idea of you know, being very work, you know, addicted to work. You know, Pluto kind of rules addictions. So perhaps there's been a bit of a work addiction going on. And in the last 17 years, perhaps you've really started to see that, you know, maybe you've gleaned a lot of results from that work addiction and Pluto is bringing you some riches now from all the hard work. Or perhaps you've reached a point of burnout and you no longer want to work as hard as that, and actually you want to enjoy some of the other things in life. For example, your 7th house of one-to-one relationships, where Pluto is now moving into for the next 20 years, and you'll be undergoing this journey of close one-to-one partnerships, friendships, you know, close connections to family members, for example, somebody that you really trust and is there for you and you're there for them, as well as kind of, you know, the longer term partnerships like a marriage partner, for example. And perhaps you may experience the tension of being in a relationship and not wanting to be in a relationship. And, you know, do you choose to not be in a relationship anymore? So that you don't have to face some of these shadows. And I think sometimes Pluto turns up in this way where it's yeah, you can get rid of one relationship, but actually there's another one knocking at your door, because these are the lessons that we're here to learn. And Pluto has this excellent way of sort of just ripping away things that are no longer serving us, and sometimes putting in our path exactly what it is that we need to be learning. And so in your 7th house, you know, perhaps you're getting married after a period of being with someone for a long time, but not wanting to make that commitment. Yeah, and perhaps you're going on a journey as well of doing some kind of deep reflective psychological work, because, you know, Aquarius being the air sign, perhaps you're working with a counselor or a therapist to really understand what it is about being in relationships that make you feel powerful, but also make you feel very kind of solid and secure and kind of Plutonian. Okay. Virgo risings. Okay, I've got to collect the kids soon, so let's speed these up a bit. I'm sorry, I will try and be as thorough as possible. Virgo risings, this one is going from your 5th house of children, romance, fun, creativity, where perhaps over the last 16 years you've been going through an experience of finding out that you really are creative, whereas at the beginning perhaps you felt like you weren't so creative. Perhaps you felt restricted because maybe you just had children, for example, and you were feeling sort of rigid and a bit kind of stuck, and like your world couldn't feel expansive and creative. And now you're reaching the end of that transit, and you're feeling that actually I've got all of this creative power in my hands, and now I've got the time to actually use it and play with it. And it's moving into your 6th house. Pluto and Aquarius will be in your 6th house, Virgo risings, for the next 20 years. So this is the house of health, daily routines. It can be the house of our employees, if we have employees, perhaps power struggles with employees, and a deep reflection and regeneration journey around your own health, and what you do to kind of keep yourself feeling resourceful and powerful and strong. You know, Pluto is connected to the idea of being strong as well. And if the things that you currently do to support that stuff, or perhaps you don't do anything to support that stuff, and now Pluto comes knocking, and it's like, okay, look at your health, look at what you're doing, and now let's try and start making some changes. So if you've never done any exercise in your entire life, perhaps Pluto comes along and kind of goes, right, well, I'm going to, I don't know, just an example, give you a broken ankle, because you need to appreciate that whilst you've got good movement and mobility and everything in your life, that you need to really sort of empower that, work on that, build it up, and make it a resource, make your body a resource that can really support you through this lifetime. Okay, Libra rising. Pluto in Capricorn has been in your 4th house of roots, ancestors, tribe, parents, grandparents, home, the building that you live in, for the last 16 years. And perhaps this has really kind of helped you to understand what it is to kind of create a lineage that will kind of live beyond you. And it's moving into your 5th house of children, romance, creativity, fun, and perhaps there's a real seriousness as Pluto moves into Aquarius tonight. There's like a real seriousness of like, do I have fun, or perhaps I just want to get more serious and more deep about the kind of fun that I have. Perhaps I'm much more interested in the idea of like inventing things and being a bit of a kind of mad professor type, and using the internet and using technology to create things, and things that will have a powerful impact upon humanity, for example. I think for a lot of Libra risings, this could be a really powerful time to just kind of play and explore and, you know, discover upon really groundbreaking technology, but that kind of helps change the world even. It sounds a bit big, but you know, it's true. That, you know, but that discovery comes about through playing and this deep sense of curiosity, and, you know, really Libra risings probably will lean into the idea of AI much more than perhaps other people, because Aquarius is ruling, oh, my cupboard just opened, that was a bit freaky, Thomas the Tank Engine magazine clipping out there. Pluto in Aquarius in the 5th house is just like, oh, you know, AI is fun. What can we do with this? What can I do with that? You know, how many Libra risings haven't yet played around with ChatGPT? And then, like, perhaps for me, like, I'm not a Libra rising, perhaps, you know, I'm well behind on that story. And Libra risings are really utilizing AI to kind of really create some amazing things. Okay. And also like witnessing the idea of like, if you've got any children, or if you're trying to get pregnant, for example, there's a lot of power and transformation going into how you relate to your children, you know, power dynamics between yourself and your children. You know, perhaps if you've got a newborn baby, perhaps you're really feeling that kind of that deep, where you're faced with this fear of like absolute sleep deprivation, but absolute exhilaration that you've got this amazing like creation of yours kind of in your arms, but you're also absolutely knackered, tired, and you're really feeling like you're being tested to your limits, that you know you have this responsibility of a child, and that you are looking after them, and that's part of your story at the moment. Okay, Scorpio rising, this one has been in your 3rd house of a local community, neighborhood, siblings, living environment as well, learning and communications. And now, you know, perhaps you've been on a bit of a journey around those themes. You know, perhaps your relationship with your siblings is not what it was 16 years ago. Perhaps it's undergone a kind of deep transition of like where the power lay, but also in living environment, you know, perhaps your living environment has changed or kind of called for some deep kind of injection of finances over the last 16 years, because, you know, Pluto, like I said, it likes to kind of get rid of things that no longer serve us. And sometimes when Pluto is in your third house, it can be kind of like, oh, this house around us is like not serving us because it needs this change or that change, for example. And now Pluto's moving into Aquarius in your fourth house of roots, lineage, family, grandparents, parents. And the fourth house is quite a private place. So there's some deep inner work going on here for Scorpio risings over the next 20 years, where there's possibly a shift of power between parents and yourself, grandparents and yourself. Perhaps there is a deep realization that the home that you're living in, you know, provides you with a lot of riches in terms of perhaps the security of it, but, you know, it's like, but do you feel like that home is serving you? Is it really empowering you, or is it feeling like a noose around your neck? That could feel like a bit of a thing for Pluto going through the fourth house. And perhaps there's a real intrigue in kind of connecting on a spiritual level to people that are no longer here. So that family lineage, doing the family tree, that could definitely be a thing for Scorpio risings in the coming 20 years. Really kind of noting the kind of deeply emotive story of the people that kind of preceded you to who you are today, and kind of how you consider what it is that you will kind of leave behind as a Scorpio rising once you pass on to the next realm. You know, perhaps just makes me think about like writing a will, or kind of looking through the deeds of a house if you own a house, and really kind of digging deep into like, you know, what you know, who really owns this property? Do I own this property? Is it kind of safe in my hands? Or does it belong to somebody else? And what's the kind of power play? You know, like, for example, if you've got a very long mortgage, many years mortgage on a place, for example, then perhaps you feel like the property belongs to your bank manager, and kind of working out like, you know, is there ways that I can make this more my own, pay off bigger chunks at a time, for example, so that it's mine and it's solid. Okay, Sagittarius rising, this one's been in your second house. So Pluto and Capricorn's been in your second house of personal resources, self-worth over the last 16 years, meaning that you've had a real check-in point with kind of like how you feel about yourself, how you do your daily finances. Perhaps there has been like power plays between yourself and people that give you money, for example. So maybe there's been ideas of being, what's that word, promoted at work, for example, maybe a big jump in promotion, but perhaps that's come at the kind of end, towards the end, unless you've got planets in Capricorn in that second house. Perhaps this has come towards the end of Pluto and Capricorn in your second house. This idea of like finally being recognized and given the riches that you deserve for the material, earthy riches, Capricorn, material, earth, tangible resources for all of your hard work and efforts. Maybe you've been working on a big kind of financial project over the last 16 years, and now it's kind of paying out dividends, for example. And now Pluto in Aquarius is moving into your third house of siblings, learning and communication, and perhaps there's some power stories between yourself and siblings if you have any. It can also be like cousins as well, you know, those kind of early childhood friendships that we have. And you know, perhaps you will be, not that it's a nice thing to think about, but, you know, as a Cancer rising, I'm learning this story of like, you know, life and death side by side. Perhaps you are learning how to kind of help honor the life of your siblings, you know, through working with them, helping them through some like tricky health aspects, for example. Hopefully not, but that can be one of the signatures. And perhaps your living environment is now starting to feel like it's no longer serving you. Perhaps you want to make some changes about where you live, for example. Perhaps your living environment just kind of, when you think about like the setup of an area that you live in, for example, a city, perhaps where you're living right now just starts to feel a bit more kind of unsafe. Pluto kind of brings up this idea of like safety and shadow. Perhaps you no longer want to live there. and you perhaps you just don't feel like you want to maybe go outside so much, for example, and so you choose to kind of move to a different area. That could be a Pluto in the third house thing. And also learning, perhaps you're going through this deep transition of how your mind works, and checking in with kind of your thought processes, the things that you do to kind of nourish your mind on a regular basis, and if they're serving you, or if there's some sort of mental activities you're doing or kind of conversations that you're having that are like perhaps having a kind of poisoning effect, and that you kind of know that it's no longer good for you, and you're having a purging of perhaps relationships or the kind of newspapers that you read or the stuff that you read online. If it's not serving you, then get rid of it. Capricorn rising. Okay, this has been in your first house of self. This is what I had a little chat about at the beginning. Self, body, front door to the world, psychology, and this has been in a deep transition over the last 16 years, and perhaps you've had a deep story about kind of like who you are, what makes you you, how you're a very kind of solid, dependable, very Capricornian figure, very Saturn ruled figure, reliable, you look after things, you play the long game. And by playing the long game, you've kind of reached this point where you are transformed as a person, and you are ready for Pluto to move into your second house of personal resources. Perhaps there is a bolstering of personal resources. Perhaps there is some power going into your kind of your own experience of kind of building material wealth around you. Perhaps that begins with a bit of a crisis point as Pluto moves into Aquarius tonight, where the material things around you maybe no longer feel kind of solid, and perhaps really the kind of solid power for you now lies in the idea of relinquishing all of your possessions to welcome in something new, and your self-worth can really kind of rise up with this kind of very powerful idea of, my self-worth is very connected to who I am as a person, and my possessions, they don't matter to me. I can't take them with me into the next life, that kind of thing. But this is, it's quite a powerful one. Perhaps if you're employed, then you are experiencing power struggles at work potentially. Perhaps you're awaiting a promotion, but it's just not happening, and you feel like you're being fobbed off by your boss, who is always dangling that carrot but never quite giving you the promotion. And I imagine that at the end of this 20 years, your relationship with finances or your material possessions could feel so different that actually you're like, why did I ever want that promotion in the beginning anyway? Because really it's all just stuff. It doesn't mean anything, and I can't take it with me. It's that kind of story unfolding. Aquarius, this Pluto and Capricorn has been in your 12th house for the last 16 years. This kind of deeply private, difficult to access space. For us personally, it's a bit of a personal blind spot. It's very connected to finding a sense of faith and trust, but also sometimes being separated from society through illness or through like a deep need to rest. And there's been there's deep spiritual work that comes from that. And now the power, Pluto, is moving into your first house of self. And so Pluto is going through a deep renovation work with, what am I doing on a daily basis, which infuses my power? Am I giving my power away to other people, or am I keeping it for myself? Is there an ability to kind of share power and have more of a balanced approach? Do I feel like, perhaps over the next 20 years, you're somebody that is really very comfortable with the idea of life and death, and the balance, the kind of delicate balance of both of those things side by side. And lots of people are coming to you to learn from you because they really feel that you can hold that space of life and death, of power and systems. I keep saying power. I'm going to try and find another word. Just an ability to kind of honor like fear and shadow work, and people really find that sense of comfort through you, because you basically, with Pluto in your first house, you are the power over the next 20 years. And finally, Pisces rising. Pluto and Capricorn has been in your 11th house of community. and social networks. And also the kind of groups that you belong to. The 11th house is a very kind of sociable place. And perhaps the groups, you've outgrown groups, and the kind of groups that you want to be a part of now. Perhaps at the beginning, like 16 years ago, perhaps you were part of like, you know, like a school sports team, for example, a very traditional sports team, because it's Capricorn, right? So like the school netball team, the school football team, the school basketball team, all the ball teams, maybe the tennis team. And over the last 16 years, you've realized that, you know, maybe there was quite a lot of power struggles in that teamwork, and perhaps now you're part of a group that is much more connected to building up your power, as opposed to trying to beat it down through this idea of like teamwork. You know, we think about the idea of teamwork being a really positive thing, but sometimes teamwork is rarely balanced, is it? And when we think about Pluto being our own power, you know, perhaps it felt like you were never really sort of recognized in the team that you played for, whereas now maybe you're part of like a knitting circle, maybe you are part of a book club, maybe you're even part of an online network of friends. And because it's Aquarius, being very connected to technology and online, and maybe you really feel like you've found your people now, and there isn't so much of that kind of power struggle. It's not a competitive thing anymore. It's more of just like an enjoyment thing, like enjoying hobbies kind of with other people, alongside other people. And now the planet of regeneration and rebirth, Pluto, is moving into Aquarius in your 12th house, which is the area of kind of rest, surrender, have faith, personal blind spot, deeply spiritual work. And Pluto perhaps can bring in some deeply transformative, intuitive, psychic experiences. Perhaps they can feel quite confronting at times. Perhaps, you know, when Pluto first moves into Aquarius, this can feel like perhaps nightmares could be happening, or you find yourself kind of dwelling on the idea of like worst case scenario, for example. But actually through rest, you really need to honor rest when Pluto is in your 12th house, because it is asking you to kind of surrender and have faith. So I would lean into things, lean into your moon sign where you feel your sense of comfort and having faith, and make sure that your relationship with, you know, with rest, taking sick days when you need to, for example, taking time out from society when you need to, that will be important as well. You know, perhaps you're a new mum and you've got a new baby and you just can't face the idea of actually being out and about, and you just take some months, some years where you are just away from society. And even though sometimes the transits through the 12th house can feel a bit like we can't recognize them, we can't see them, there is a lot of deep inner work that's going on, and that can bubble up at various times. Like if you've got planets in the sign of in Aquarius, for example, then as Pluto reaches those planets, there could be some events, for example, that take place that really kind of test your power and your ability to kind of work with power or against power, and psychic powers. You know, for Pisces rising, this could definitely be something like finding that your ability to be psychic, to read tarot cards, to read a crystal ball, to read tea leaves, do astrology, whatever it is, perhaps you're really recognizing now, and you know the timing is right, divine timing and all that, for you to lean into those practices, those studies, and really kind of recognize your ability to, that you do have the power, you do have the ability to read the tarot cards. You're not wrong when you're looking at that pack and you're like, well, you know, there's an image here and it could mean this, but you know, who am I to say that kind of thing. It could be like that kind of thing where it's like, actually, no, you are the person to say that. You are reading it the way that you are reading it, and that is the power. You have got this power in your hands, this deeply psychic power, this power connected to intuition. Like, trust your intuition, definitely. Over the next 20 years, Pisces risings, trust your intuition, because it more than likely it will be on point. So I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you so much for watching. I've got one-to-one readings available. A lot of December's getting filled up quite quickly now. I've got some availability in January, a little bit left in November. I'll put the link below this video to book in for one-to-one readings. I'm also running, very excited, I've got Astrology Treehouse, which is my monthly membership circle where we get together and talk about a certain thing in astrology every month. And we also kind of, I'll send out videos on a weekly basis. So that's a closed group, and it will open again in April for new members. If you're interested, I will start sharing about that kind of early 2025. But as a part of their package and as a part of a kind of broader package, I'm opening up a really special date, Saturday the 4th of January, get it in your diary, where we are going to look at, this is for everybody to join in, not just the Astrology Treehouse members, but for everybody to join in about forecasting your own year ahead. I think it's, I've called it like my 2025 stars made simple for it. I think that's the title of it. I'm going to be sharing really soon about that, and it will be available on my website, freyastrology.com, to book into. There's going to be an early bird price up until some date in December. I haven't quite decided yet. So the early bird price will be available. There'll be about 10 spaces for this. It's going to be like a workshop, a classrooms. There'll be a little bit of kind of teaching, but it'll be more about kind of like, let's look at this in your chart. You know, where's this going to be in your chart? Let's look about, you know, should I take the job? Will I get married? Am I going to have babies? That kind of thing. And we can look at where the transiting planets are in the sky right now and where they are in your own birth chart, and see kind of which life areas are going to be illuminated for you in 2025. So this is like one of my favorite things about astrology, anticipating what's up ahead. And I want to share it all with you. And I'd be really excited to have you there. So please, I will soon share about this in a write-up on my website, and it will be available to book. Yeah, very limited spaces, probably about 10 spaces with early bird pricing up until kind of later in December, and then it will move on to just the standard pricing until the 4th of January when the event takes place. So I hope to see some of you there, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.